This week on No Hardware Required, we're talking about Druva's MSP program. With me as always is my co-host Stephen Manley, our CTO. Thanks for joining. Hi, and welcome to Druva's No Hardware Required podcast. I'm your host, W. Curtis Preston, aka Mr. Backup. With me, I have the guy that appears to have moved to the Netherlands since the last time I saw him.
Or Florida.
Manley.
Or Florida. It's oranges behind me. No.
You just look like you're at the World Cup with the Netherlands team.
Well, if I recall correctly, they didn't even make it through the group stage, did they? Or no, wait,
it
they
wasn't.
beat the US?
It wasn't a good World Cup for the Netherlands, but
yeah, that's all right. That's all right. The important thing is that England finally. Oh wait, no, they didn't.
That's just not nice. That's not nice. Well, we have a couple of guests. We're going to talk about some stuff we don't normally talk about here on the podcast. And so I want to introduce our guests. We have Andy Abbey and Haran Pereira. How's it going, guys?
Very well, thank you. Thanks, Curtis.
Yeah, going great. Thanks for having us.
And Haran looks ready to do some sort of sport behind him with that.
My wife's bike. I don't have a.
Oh, that's your wife's bike. Okay.
Yeah. Mine is off to the side. It's also a nice bike, but yeah.
Gotcha. It just happens to be your wife's bike in view. I like it.
Yeah, it's prettier than mine, so hence it gets the center stage.
So, we're going to talk about Druva's MSP program, and there may be listeners or viewers that are unaware that we have an MSP program. So who wants to jump in and just sort of describe what the program is?
Yeah, I can do that. So Druva's MSP program is essentially a program for MSPs, meaning there's different commercials and so on, extra assistance from us as a partner, as a software vendor that our typical partners don't get, as well as a product. So we've got multi-tenant capabilities, manage multiple customers from a single view, all of that stuff. And, the reason that we exist as a team is we want to help our MSPs differentiate, right? We want to help them do good business because, there's a bunch of things that we get from MSPs. Every time we sign up a partner that they ask, questions like the topic of this episode, how do we price and package these things? How do we make sure that we're profitable? How do we stand out from the crowd? That's why we exist.
So I got to ask you, Haran, because I've been to Druva for a while, and Curtis and I are always talking. There's no hardware required. We do the job for you. This product runs itself. So if I'm a customer, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, why do I need an MSP for a product like Druva? I see why I need it for one of those legacy Lego put it together yourself products, but why would a Druva customer need an MSP?
Yeah, good question. So, what the customer's doing by going to an MSP, doing a few things. Number one, they're buying an outcome, right? So what they're getting is all that really good technology, but they're getting a guaranteed or, an SLA on a success rate, right? So you get the product and you get a success rate of 98% from the, backup success from the MSP. And you've also got to think about, MSPs, they're a bunch of tech nerds that get together and they are experienced in just technology, right? So their job, they've got 2 or 3 backup administrators watching stuff, improving stuff day to day. So it's that expertise for the front end implementation, but also the eyes on the product, making sure things are successful and continue to be so. Right. So
I think just to add to that, I think MSPs are really good at creating service ecosystems. They have backup as a service as maybe one line item in their service catalog, but they might also offer security services as well. And they tend to bundle services together to create a general outcome. And generally, if an MSP is working, one of their customers is a law firm, that law firm's core competency isn't backup, it isn't IT. So to offload that off to an MSP is that's giving them a benefit. They're interested in the outcome, not necessarily product features. And IT is always seen as a cost center in organizations like that. So partnering with an MSP opens the door to outcome-focused services rather than product features and hiring a bunch of technical staff in the background, which, quite frankly, could be used for other things.
So with an MSP, they're not. It's not like it's not just a VAR. The MSP can actually run the Druva console for them, basically monitoring their backups, making sure that the backups that are
Yeah.
supposed to be happening are happening.
Exactly that. So with the Druva MSP program, what Druva has built is a managed service center, which offers the ability for the MSP to provision their own tenants. Once them tenants are provisioned, the MSP then can add their own value on top of that. They can manage those tenants on behalf of their customers. They could even delegate access to the end customer, so you can have a co-managed offering as well. So it just gives them that flexibility to offer a range of different services. So from a very basic offering where the customer might do some management themselves, and hey, the MSP might look after the backups on a weekend because they don't want to employ staff to look at stuff on the weekend. So there's different ways and means an MSP can construct a service using Druva's managed service center. As well as that, they get intuitive reports, the ability to do billing. We've got really good API integration into the managed service center as well. So it gives the MSP the ability to do a lot of customization, and I think, to Haran's point, differentiate just from the regular Druva products.
So I'm curious. I mean, because Haran, I think, just lovingly described the MSPs as a bunch of tech nerds, which is awesome. And you mentioned the API. So I guess how many of these MSPs are they building things on top of our APIs, whether it's the billing or other kind of stuff? Is that a core piece of what they're trying to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a couple of examples with MSPs in EMEA, which is my kind of area of responsibility. They often surprise me when we go onto a call what they've done with our APIs. They're moving data into a centralized data warehouse. They're reacting to their clients' and customers' needs. The ability to produce reports necessarily, which we haven't constructed out of the box. MSPs are doing that in the background. They're building reports that are useful for their customers. And like I said, that might be moving data into a data warehouse and then querying that and running reports that, frankly, we don't have because we haven't developed them. So often surprising us with what they've been able to do with the products.
Yeah. The other things, think about the things that we have API integration for that maybe the smaller and mid-market customers don't necessarily have the tools like XDR and stuff like that. So they MSPs can unleash the more advanced capabilities and really get the value out of the product.
So you committed the using an acronym without defining it, Haran.
Oh, yes. XDR. It's those systems that pull in all the logs, make sense of it, and spit something back out and say, hey, there is an event to look out for here. What do we do? And then Druva says this event has happened. Those systems, XDR seams, come back to Druva and say you need to quarantine that file because it's a threat. And then Druva will come back and say it's quarantined. We're never going to recover that back into the environment.
Yeah. And Curtis, just for your benefit, XDR stands for Extended Detection and Response, and so this is sort of the more modern security tools where again it's not just about let's build a perimeter because we all know that's going to get compromised. It's that extended detection and response that you're trying to do internally to keep on top of things. And Haran has a good point, is that because that's newer tech, because it's a newer approach, a lot of times companies don't have that kind of expertise themselves. So being able to plug in Druva with some of those tools, again, I think where Andy was going is getting that end-to-end bundle. So it's like the goodness of Druva, which is we do the job for you, but now it's a broader job that the MSP is doing for the customer.
Right. So I know that you guys, when we first said that we wanted to have this chat, you wanted to talk about bundling. And, because I don't live that world, I was like, wow, that sounds really exciting. Why are we talking about bundling? That's what I want to know.
Yeah. Good question. So, when we speak with MSPs that sort of, join up for our program and so on, they're always asking things like, all right, now that I've got these tool sets at my fingertips, how do I get these in the hands of my customers easier. And so bundling is one of those approaches where we say, if you've got a customer that's buying M365 from you, bundle back up with that, right? So there are a few ways that they can do that. They can just, have it as an opt-in by default, right? And so they say, we sell M365 secured, protected, and all this stuff. And, it might be X dollars per user, and included in that is the backup, right? So that's like the easiest approach for number one. An MSP wants to make sure they're giving a top end solution to customers and differentiating it. So their version of M365 versus a typical reseller that's just doing M365 is a lot better. There's more value in it. It's everything the customer wants in one package, in one bundle. Customer doesn't have to think about it. And so that's bundling our product in with existing products that they're already selling, and it's also bundling their value-added services, right? So Andy was talking a lot about the value that an MSP brings that frankly Druva doesn't. We're not built for eyes on the backups every single day and testing those for the customer. Whereas the MSP can bundle in their, say, advanced or premium packages, quarterly disaster recovery tests, right? Where they leverage, say, our capability to do disaster recovery from VMware to AWS, right? And there's orchestration that we have in that platform. The MSP can then leverage that and bundle in recovery testing that happens every quarter. And the value of that to the customer is, catching configuration drift, right? We've all seen this where, something, we did a DR test a year ago. We do it a year later when there's an actual event and nothing works, right? So to catch that, it's, an application change. There was another server added. There was, a different kind of architecture that we have to make sure the backup system captures and orchestrates back in the disaster recovery. So they're the sorts of things that you want to sort of, the MSP bundles in, and they make it easy for the customer, basic versus the premium option. All of this stuff gets bundled in together. The customer doesn't have to go and, check a million boxes for a million different things that they want.
I think just to add to that as well, I mean, the title of the podcast is No Hardware Required. Now, for an MSP to build a DR as a service offering is incredibly expensive, with all the hardware, software, and the management and the complexity around that. Just for one service line item is incredibly costly. With Druva, they can actually add that service line item pretty easily with no upfront cost in hardware. They're not taking out long-term leases and things like that. And like, to Haran's point as well, a lot of customers just don't build DR platforms like they used to. They don't have multiple data centers, etc. An MSP partnering with Druva gets that out the box, essentially. They can go to market with a DR service. Not only that, we also talk about AWS as well and how they can potentially have service management for AWS. They can manage aspects of AWS for the customer. That also adds another service line item. That's additional revenue for the MSP as well. So that's other things that we like to introduce.
Stephen, when Haran was talking about the idea of, I like this idea of selling a secure Microsoft 365. I've been around a while. You remember Fast and Wide SCSI, right? Remember Fast Wide SCSI? Yeah. When they came out with Fast Wide SCSI, we immediately started calling the other products Slow and Skinny SCSI. So I could see them selling the Secure 365, and then next to it they say, Insecure 365. Yeah. I like that. Anyway, you were going to make an actual question, probably.
Well, more a point, I guess. But it is interesting, because I think both you and I, we're not as versed in the MSP world as Haran and Andy are. But I thought one of the interesting things, because going in, right, first question, why do you need an MSP? Druva is awesome. You don't need anything else. And the bundling piece is interesting. I think the other piece that's interesting is, because we are sort of cloud native, because we're API centric, it allows these MSPs, it sounds like, to be able to do more. than what they could do with, again, sort of traditional box server, software kind of architecture. And so it starts to open my mind into, I guess, this maybe this broader world of a cloud ecosystem, right? So it's secure 365. It's potentially what you could do with cloud native apps, and I guess that's the part that starts to become interesting to me, more so over time. And I'm curious, Andy and Haran, your guys' view of, do we see MSPs evolving to maybe offering more and more of sort of almost a secure VPC in AWS, or a secure protected VPC? Do we see them sort of layering more and more that way? Is that where they're heading?
Yeah, for sure. So, one of the things that we're seeing is the whole move to cloud. It's, for customers, when they see things, they're like, oh, it's low hanging fruit. Things cost less in the cloud. I'd like to get there. When they get there, they realize they don't know what they don't know. And that's where the MSP comes in and says, hey, this is how you do, what we used to do with firewall appliances and stuff on prem. This is how we do it in the cloud world, right? And so they do sell, the secure VPC, like you were saying, Steve, the environment. So that, to Andy's point earlier about, we don't do DR the way we used to with data centers and stuff. They do it in cloud, but they have to have all that security and stuff in place, right? And one of the things that we allow, we enable our MSPs to evolve their services, right? So let's just take plain old backup, right? If you're doing backup as a service, you have recovery, right? What we will enable an MSP to do with the advanced Druva capabilities is, a lot of my MSPs, and I cover America's, APAC, and he's covering more the EMEA. They're doing a lot of these, like, it's now a ransomware recovery service, right? So it's not just, hey, we'll do backup and recovery as a service. It's we're going to help you in a time of a crisis, right? So if you think about when it hits, they're like, okay, what do we do? We assess the damage, all these sorts of bits and pieces, and then we respond, right? How do we respond? Do we, wipe out this data center because we don't know that it's safe to recover in? Do we just recover somewhere else in the VPC, for instance, in AWS? And when we're doing that, or if we're recovering back to the same place, let's do recovery, make sure there are no threats in the system. And that's where features like, the advanced ransomware recovery that Druva has comes into play. So an MSP takes that feature set and builds a service around it, right? And really sort of amplifies the value back to the customer, right? So it's no longer just recovery, it's a ransomware recovery service.
So when I think about this, I know that, thinking about the way that MSP can package things, and, with Druva, first off, it's typically the customer that's going to be running the backups, right? But with an MSP, it's going to be the MSP running. Druva also typically has kind of one way to price the services. Using an MSP, can they be more flexible with pricing than Druva can?
Yeah. So I'll touch on one point, and then maybe Andy, you can touch on the metering. So there's a number of different ways, right? So Druva, for instance, you buy an upfront subscription; it's a year. Our MSPs typically offer more flexibility, such as they'll offer monthly billing to the customer. Right. So what an MSP could do there's two distinct scenarios. They can have an agreed amount of product that is equally split into 12 chunks, and it's very predictable. It'd just be like taking, what Druva does and break it down into 12, because that's what they do. Think about their locally connected, local currency, well-trusted partner in the region, and they can do that stuff, whereas a Druva can't, right, in terms of process and monthly bills for a customer. And the second way that they can go about it is post usage. They can say, hey, Mr. Customer, for this month, you used 393 users. Next month, 412. and so they can do that measurement and bill it back to the customer, and they can also be more flexible or simplify things, right? So a lot of our MSPs just say unlimited storage, unlimited everything, and this is your price per user. It might be a different price point than us, but they take away that pain. And Andy, maybe the stuff that we were talking about earlier, you were talking about how one of Andy's MSPs was moving across from a specific server plus storage model, right, Andy? And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly that. So, I mean, one of the anxieties with an MSP when they're introducing a new vendor to deliver a service line item like backup is they've been used to, sizing, pricing, configuring a certain way, and then they look at a SaaS platform and they think it's completely different. It isn't a lot of respects, but actually they have the flexibility to use their existing pricing models and just adapt them accordingly. So, we charge per backend terabyte. That's how we charge for hybrid. But if the MSP wants to charge per server, they still have the ability to do that, and they can do it in many different ways they wish. I mean, if you take, for example, the average server size on disk is 120 gig. They can easily have a cost per gig model or a cost per server model, whichever way they want to do it. And they have the flexibility to do that. And I think as MSP consultants, it's about sort of allaying those fears that initially MSPs have. Is how do I take this to my sales team? How do I take it to my SEs? How do they go out and price this in the marketplace? And what we help them do is come up with that pricing structure, that pricing model. Allay those anxieties so they can go to market confidently and start winning those customers on whatever pricing structure they choose. And it has to fit their model ultimately. We on a 12-month commitment, we want them to get to market quickly. We want to get them consuming, and sometimes that is taking the path of least resistance with the sales team, not changing too many things, and giving them a pricing structure, a pricing model that they can work with.
Can't let this drop where Haran mentioned, I think, what was it? Basic old backup. First thing I thought of was Curtis, but but the fancy ransomware recovery backup, that's me. No, but it is interesting. I think that ability to offer that service, right? Because Curtis, I know you and I have spent a lot of podcasts talking about ransomware recovery is different and ransomware protection. It's different than what you've done traditionally, and so I think being able to work with an MSP, I think that could be really interesting for customers who do feel a bit overwhelmed. Right, that they look at this ransomware challenge and they go, I don't know where to start. Druva is a great product, but there's still a lot of stuff they have to do. I could see the MSPs being a really interesting space for that. As you guys see the MSPs working, so things like DR, ransomware recovery, I mean, is that the more common, I guess, bundle that they're trying to sell to their customers at this point? How do I tell a good MSP from a bad one? What are the kind of questions I might want to ask to see if this MSP is right for me?
I think ultimately, when as an end customer looking at an MSP, it has to be on value and outcome. You're looking as a customer at an outcome. If you want ransomware protection, if you look at it from a 360 perspective, it's not just backing up your data and being immutable and all those good things that we can do with Druva. It's all the add-on components with it. They might have a security operations center where they can monitor threats that are inbound to the customer, and they can tie those and correlate events together. So having a good backup product that delivers all of the things that you need it to from a ransomware perspective, Druva can do that. The MSP can add extra value on top of that, and then they can bundle that as a service and offer it, at a price point which is cheaper than what the customer can do themselves. If the customer has to employ a bunch of SOC guys to sit in an operations center to monitor firewall traffic, etc., that's not a great use of a company's budget dollars. If you offload that into an MSP, they could be monitoring 10 customers with the same amount of people. So it makes more sense from that perspective. And as you say, when we work with MSPs, some MSPs have very mature offerings in the security space. They're delivering security services, and this really is the icing on the cake, so to speak. Other MSPs are just starting out. They're starting to build a security service, and ultimately, Druva is a great place for them to start doing that because of all of the other components that we have. They might have had what I would class as a 2D backup service, backup and recovery. Great, we've been doing that for years. But then when you tie in all of the other capabilities that Druva offer on top of that, we're backing up your data. Because we've got your data, we have insights. We can do anomaly detection. We've got curated snapshots. When you bundle all those things together, it's a compelling offer for an end customer. And then couple that with, SIEM as a service, for example, which a lot of MSPs do now. It's a 360 ransomware protection view that an MSP can offer, and they're differentiating from just what Druva can offer in the background.
I like it. Well, I think we've kind of reached the end of our time. I think this was very interesting discussion. I like the idea of that an end user. I think the biggest, the two biggest things I see an end user get out of the MSP using an MSP would be, flexibility in the way they pay for the product. But this idea of actually having somebody monitoring your backups, making sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. Honestly, there's a lot of companies that wish they had that, right?
They can't afford to have that. So an MSP is usually the only route they can have that level of protection. So
yeah, and also you have the long-standing problem of no one wants to be that person at a company. No one wants to be responsible for the backup system. Here you have a company that will do that for you, right? I really like that idea. And I think that it helps MSPs. It helps them differentiate against their competitors because they can just bundle in the backup and recovery service. And I liked the 2D backup. So like, backup and recovery. And then now we have 3D backup with all these other things. I like that. So thanks, guys, for. I know that we're in several different time zones here, so thanks for taking the time to do that.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, been a pleasure, guys. Thanks for having us. Yeah.
And thanks for picking on me, Stephen.
Hey, at least they didn't say old and tired backup, because then
We can always count on you. All right. And we can count on the listeners as well. Thanks for listening. And remember to subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. And as always, here at Druva, there's no hardware required.